I'm Action.
I'm Set.
And I'm Ron.
And on July 27th, we went to the Museum of Science and Industry. This had to be, well, one of the best museums we were at on the whole trip.
It was bigger than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, me too. It was just really cool to see like all the planets.
It had a lot of stuff.
Yeah, all the way on in here, guys. All the way on in. Like I said, get cozy. Alright, couple extra steps in there and close the airlock up behind us. Welcome on board, guys. Now, in the interest of complete and total honesty, we do not come standard on a submarine. Exactly like the ones on this side, and we lowered the floor as well. Railing here and about a foot and a half above your heads down there. Factor in the cabinet on this side, and you're left with very little space to work with. Add to that when this boat was captured, it had a crew of 59 men on board. Crews scrambling for their dying state. Like I said, welcome to the control room. So this is where the entire boat's actually controlled from. The two wheels next to me here, these are the planesman stations controlling the dive planes. They help with the diving and rising. And the gray box there is the helmsman station. Controls the rudder, helps move the boat to the left and right. Controls the rudder. Ladder here leads up to the conning tower, originally the main entrance and exit for the sub. The little room above our heads is where both periscopes were housed. One for attacking, one second for navigating. All the way out in here, guys. We got a few more squeezing in behind you there. Now, the conning tower here is also really where the story of the boat's capture gets started. In the days leading up to June 4th of 1944, one of the lookouts spotted an American airplane. On decks here, Captain Harold Lunga immediately gave the order for his boat to crash dive. During one of these, all of the off-duty sailors run to the very front of the sub and then jump on top of each other and dogpile. The added weight of 40 men at the nose of this boat will force it underwater even faster. The crew does this right, and they'll have the entire sub underneath the surface in 35 seconds. The crew does this right, and once they're down there, three things on board have to be monitored extremely closely. Electricity, oxygen, themselves being hunted. That lasted for 35 hours and 19 minutes. As that time passed, the crew could hear the gaps between those pings getting shorter and shorter, which meant the Americans were getting closer and closer. So in a final attempt to escape, Lunga ordered his boat down to 500 feet. At this depth, pressure on the outer hull is 32,000 pounds per square foot. The boat's getting dangerously close to its crush depth, 755 feet. If it get that far down, the pressure's simply too much. Picture a soda can in someone's fist. You have a pretty good idea of exactly what will happen to this boat. Climbing into pitch darkness. Thanks to during that barrage, Captain Lunga is wounded in the knee. Well then, nice noisy room we all just came through. That was the diesel engine room. So if you remember, a little over 120 degrees in there. Now there's 2 engines on board that can move the boat along relatively. If those are run under the surface, all the air, so they constantly require an air supply. If those are run under the surface, all the air is going to be sucked from inside the sub in just a handful of seconds. So diving, boat transfers towards electric motors, big gray cylinders beneath us here. Those were a whole lot slower, but they had the advantages of not requiring an air supply and being almost completely silent. If you're trying to sneak up on or run away from an allied ship, that silence is absolutely perfect. Speaking of allies, though, we do still have that boarding party to deal with. And when those the boat, he calls for 5 volunteers and orders everybody else off of the sub. Now those men brace themselves against the hatch, and expecting either a wall of water or an explosion, they throw the hatch open! And absolutely nothing happens. Now Gower and his men do find the room on the opposite side is lit by this kind of weird greenish glow. And that is because the Germans coated all of their major hatches, pipes, and even a few critical dials with this phosphorescent paint. You guys just think of it like an early form of emergency lighting. So all these glowing pieces lead right for the main exits of the boat. 8. Also in here, Gowrie and his men do find that 14th and final scuttling charge. Story goes it was shoved inside a coffee can, and like all the rest, had never actually been armed to explode. The officers whose responsibility was to arm those charges had all either been wounded or had abandoned ship before attending to that portion of their duties. Back of the room there, that's the manual controls for the rudder, and using them, the Americans unjam the boat's rudder, attach a tow cable to the sub, and haul it all the way back across the Atlantic to a base in Bermuda. Once it's there, the U.S. Navy comes on board and strips it of as much intelligence as they can possibly get their hands on. They walk away with a little over 900 pounds. Enough intelligence that historians today put the capture of this boat with accelerating the end of the Second World War by months. Now,
so if I could first start off, the first part of our video might seem, and when I mean the first part, I mean the first few minutes might seem a little rushed. We were literally minutes away from missing the U-boat tour, which was the main reason I wanted to go. Main reason why Action and myself set only partook on the U-boat tour. But that pretty much was, in my opinion, the coolest part of the museum for me in Action. It's the U-505.
It was a Type 9 U-boat.
And when I was in 8th grade, probably about 11 years ago, I saw the German movie Das Boot, and that is one of my favorite war movies. I like the realism of the movie. The book is realistic. It was written by Lothar Gunther Bothen. I'm not pronouncing his name right. Yeah, who based it on his tour on the U-96. Obviously, this isn't the U-96. But to a certain extent, even though it wasn't like the kind, you got a sense of how cramped it was on there. I mean,
and a Type 9 is a pretty big U-boat compared to say a Type 7.
And I mean, the guy, as you saw, even though this overdub's taking post place, this guy, as you heard, he was amazing. And not enough props can go out to him because he told a pretty interesting story about the U-boat. He
kept people interested. He kept it lively, interesting. He did a good job.
And the whole capture and the whole story is very interesting. I think almost every steam engine, submarine, even an airplane carries an interesting story. The U-boat story from the U-505 is very interesting and how it got captured, which you can hear in the video. And one of the main reasons it was brought to Chicago was because of the fact that the commander of the American ship that captured the U-505 was from Chicago.
That I didn't know.
They said that on the tour. Good paying attention, actually. But yeah, to me that was...
But at the museum they also have a 727 preserved. The only 3-engine commercial airliner that Boeing ever made. It's also the only one with a T-tail assembly.
You have the first steam locomotive in the United States to go over 100 miles an hour, the 999, which is another New York Central Railway locomotive that is preserved. And it was pretty cool, honestly, to see how this tiny little locomotive was the first to go over 100 miles an hour.
United 727.
risking the aircraft really is not and to be able to look through portholes of glass in the floor so you can see what is below the seating area, which most people never have the opportunity to see.
I believe they still use these engines on the MD-88 airliner, which is still in service. Flight plan for the 727. It's a three-man crew operating it. Pilot, flight engineer.
And ensure in my own mind that everything about this flight has been satisfactorily completed. One of the pilots will do an exterior walk around of the airplane.
What's going on when you press? You're placing stress.
This is the most notable feature of the 727, the rear air stair. That column you see leads from the engine intake above the plane.
Where do you think we should go to? Where should we fly
Interesting to note, the 727 is the only three-engine aircraft manufactured by Boeing. Other three-engine aircraft were Lockheed L-1011 TriStar, and of course the McDonnell Douglas DC-10.
Where'd your brother go? Did you tell your brother?
Ju-87 Stuka dive bomber, one of the most famous dive bombers of World War II. And of course we have one of my favorite planes, the Supermarine Spitfire. British fighter of World War II, helped win the Battle of Britain.
Write about Is this the Titanic? No. It's not. You don't want to.
Oh my god, I love this.
Oh, this is cool.
Santa Rosa.
There you go. I want a Rolls Royce Phantom. Those tires, those original tires, they're called dry rot there.
Oh, then you all die. Do this. Come on. Wait, this is not.
Are from the Apollo 16.
This right here is the Apollo 8 capsule, Apollo 8 command module. Apollo 8 was the first manned mission to the moon. It was an orbital flight, didn't actually land on the moon. The crew was Frank Borman, Jim Lovell, and I believe Bill Anders. There's a lunar module mock-up. This is the thing that actually landed on the moon.
What they usually did was
Model of Sputnik 1, first artificial satellite launched into space by the Russians in February of 1957. Mercury capsule. See how cramped it is in here. Jim Lovell, of course, famously flew on Apollo 13. Of course, is a mock-up of the Wright Flyer.
To the Columbian Exposition.
I hope you enjoy our Science Museum video.
I'm Action.
I'm Seth.
And I'm Bro.